Back on the SportsMax Zone. Now, as we speak, the global numbers for COVID-19 at approximately 91.8 million, deaths nearing 2 million. Will the Olympics be held this year? Over 80% of citizens polled in Tokyo either want it to be delayed, cancelled, or they don't believe it will happen at all. The poll findings come in the wake of last week's declaration by Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga of a state of emergency in Tokyo and 3 eastern prefectures, or provinces, if you will, to stem the latest outbreak of COVID-19. In the wake of the declaration, the Japanese government is ordering the removal of public displays of the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic torches for the next month. So what, if anything, does all this mean for what the University of Oxford says will be the most expensive summer games in history? Our in-house track and field expert, Leighton Levy, joins us to discuss these issues. A lot happening in Tokyo at the moment, including, as we speak, yesterday, almost 5,000 new cases of COVID-19. Are the Olympics, Leighton, under threat?
I still think it's too early to say, Lance. By the way, good evening, guys. How's everybody doing? Yes. It's January. We're still 6 months away from the July 23rd start of the Olympic Games. And of course, there are a lot of things that are still evolving. This recent spike in Japan, and of course, the fears of the population, where 80% of the population believes that the game should either be suspended or canceled overall. But when you look at the fact, Lance, that we're still 6 months away, there's an additional $2.4 billion of cost that has gone into the Olympic Games to ensure that it happens this year. I still think that the situation could change for the better, especially with the advent of the vaccines. Several vaccines now that are emerging that I think will take some effect over the next 2 to 3 months. The thing is, WHO has said that they don't expect herd immunity in 2021, despite the rolling out of the vaccines. So that's another factor to consider. So it's still up in the air for me. I think if we're looking at March and the situation hasn't quelled in any way whatsoever in terms of these spikes that Japan is experiencing, and more importantly, spikes in countries from athletes who are traveling to Tokyo for the Olympic Games, then I think we might be in for some trouble as it relates to whether or not the games will be held or not.
Yeah, this discussion, Leighton, does have a bit of a deja vu feeling about it, because I remember like maybe February of last year when the COVID-19 pandemic reared its ugly head and became a significant threat to the Olympic Games. IOC officials were adamant that nothing would stop the Olympic Games. And you know, I just get the feeling that we're going through that again until March 24 last year, when they eventually, backed off and said, well, the games are being postponed. They were pretty, strong in their views and giving assurances left, right, and center that the games won't be postponed or cancelled.
Yeah, and that's true. But the thing is, I think the major difference this time, Lance, is that there are several other contributing factors now to whether or not the games will be held or not. Last year, in March, the pandemic was just beginning to take hold globally. I don't think anybody really understood the dynamics that were involved with, of course, ensuring that the games were safe until it was too late. I think now we've seen over the past year a number of events being held, certainly not at the scale of the Olympics, but certainly it's a blueprint to how things can actually move forward in terms of the appropriate spacing, of course, the vaccines, as I mentioned before, and of course, isolating the respective athletes who are going to be competing at the Olympic Games. The challenge is, though, that with countries like the United States, where there is half of the country believes that the virus is still a hoax or for some reason it's not real, then their athletes are going to be perhaps forced to end up taking a vaccine, which the IOC has said so far that is not mandatory. I've actually canvassed a number of the Caribbean athletes actually, and right now we're at 50-50 as it relates to who is deciding to take the vaccine or not. So those are factors that are still in play, and I think the difference between last year and this year is that there are more things in play that will perhaps enable the Olympics to be held this year as opposed to last year, when people are still feeling around trying to find solutions to whether or not they could actually go ahead with the games or not.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you quickly about the athletes and their own feeling about the Olympic Games, because in the end that played a significant part too in the decision to postpone the Games last year. But the story that has come out this week that the Japanese government ordering the removal of public displays of the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic torches for the next month. How significant is that?
I think it's more for me. It feels like tempering down expectations, so to then give themselves a little bit of ease when it relates to pressure. Because if you have those signs, the signage up, the expectation is that the Olympics will be held. So it then puts pressure on the IOC and of course the local organizing committee in Japan to feel that it's necessary for them to have the Olympic Games. You take those images away, you cannot take away some of the pressure of expectation. And so I think it's a good move in the sense of tempering expectations. But insofar as the Olympics are being held, I think it's more show than anything else. It's going to be very crucial though for them to win over the athletes' lands, which I think is the more important issue here, because there were a lot of skeptical athletes last year. I suspect that there might be as many this year, even with the vaccine. As I mentioned before, we're 50-50 with the athletes who I've spoken to so far as it relates to taking the vaccine to go to Tokyo. They also have financial considerations to take into account as well, because there are a lot of athletes who have not been earning anything. A lot of their earnings this year would perhaps be from a smattering of meets, because we've seen meets being canceled already locally here in Jamaica, where I think there are at least 6 meets that have been canceled already. Athletes are going to need meets to be able to get sharp for the Olympic Games. So we're waiting to see whether or not the Diamond League will have have those issues as well, or some of the minor meets, and then whether the athletes are comfortable enough to travel to these respective destinations and then subsequently to Tokyo. So I think that will play a bigger role in whether or not the expectations of going to the Olympics are going to be actually realized or not.
Yeah, you just mentioned your informal poll, Leighton, athletes willing to take the vaccine in the Caribbean. As far as you have polled at the moment, about 50-50. That could be an instructive number, because you hinted earlier on that last year, February, March, just ahead of the postponement of the Olympic Games, there was a strong view coming from a lot of athletes that they just weren't comfortable. And in the end, as you just mentioned, this decision could boil down to athletes and participants' comfort in going to Tokyo.
Absolutely. I mean, last year, about March, I think the polling was saying something like 80 to 85% of the athletes were not comfortable of going to the Olympic Games. Right now, the impression I get, and I'm using the Caribbean athletes as a benchmark here, that right now I think it's split down the middle. I think there are athletes who really want to go. I mean, I spoke to Asafa Powell on Saturday, and he's thinking that they should go, because he's saying that athletes have to learn to cope within the existing environment. He says he wants to end his career with an Olympic medal. He's 38 years old. He doesn't have any window left. His window is all but closed. Michelle Fraser-Price was non-committal. She said no comment when I reached out to her people. But there are athletes who are thinking that they will want to go, whether or not they take the vaccine or not. They are thinking that the Olympics are on. So right now it's about 50-50, but it could shift in the coming months if nothing significant changes as it relates to the spread, the spikes in Japan, and all the spikes in the respective countries as well.
Leighton, what we can say at this point is that I don't think that athletes will be put to the head of the queue to get the vaccines, because then you're going to run into the trouble of who's an athlete. If you stopped training 2 months ago, 6 months ago, are you still an athlete? And that would be something that would have to be coordinated by your national governments, because I don't think you have a credential that says, yeah, here it is, this proves that I am an athlete. And governments are putting healthcare workers and the elderly at the front of the queue for the vaccines, and that presents its own problems. But I want to ask about the lead time that the organizers would need in order to get these Olympics on. If it comes down to, say, March, April, and we are not clear as to, yes, we are going to go, isn't it likely that this thing may not happen, the rescheduled games?
Absolutely, because March, April then gives you a much smaller window. Because you remember, if the spikes continue in Japan, and if they don't get the virus under control in Japan, then the entire preparation, the process of preparation will be affected. So it then possibly will move the window.
But you say Japan, but remember, even if Japan is spotless where COVID is concerned, the athletes are coming from every part of the world. What about the situation in those locations?
Yeah, which is what the point I was making earlier. So a lot of it also depends on the respective situations in the countries. Remember, you're looking at 200 and odd plus countries in the world. Right now, no country in Africa has access to the vaccine, nor Australia, nor the Caribbean, well, most of the Caribbean certainly, and of course, Central America. That, I think, will play a significant role in whether or not those countries will be able to send athletes who are protected by at least the vaccine to going into Tokyo. So those factors are all things that have to be weighed and taken into consideration, George, which comes back to the point which you asked. I think if that's not done by March, April, you're looking at May, June, July, that's 3 months. I don't think the Olympics will be held. If it comes down to that point and there's still uncertainty, I think the most likely thing to happen is that the Olympic Games will be cancelled.
And can you not hear the big TV companies grumbling now, Leighton, because of the increased uncertainty? For us, where self-interest is concerned, we have many irons in this Olympic fire. There'll come a time, a day of reckoning is going to come when the big broadcasters are going to be saying to the Olympics, hey, you need to tell us yay or nay where this thing is concerned, because we can't go day to day.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of money has been invested in buying those broadcast rights, George, and a lot of companies investing that money with the intent to have at least some return on that investment. So there's a lot of financial consideration to be taken into context as well. And of course, we here at SportsMax is no different. I mean, the situation it is tenuous, but for right now, I think there's still hope for some optimism.
There you go. Leighton, thank you very much for your time. All the best to you.
Take it easy, guys. And congratulations, Manchester United on top of the league. Not for long, though.
Who is he congratulating?
I don't know who he's got. Leighton, steady. That's all I'll say to you. Steady, yeah? You don't want to start this banter about Liverpool and Manchester United, yeah? You don't want to start it. If you ever let the Old Trafford team win the league this year, I don't know what they'll have to do with you. Yeah?
We'll see you on Saturday.
All right, my friend. Good. Lance,
Yeah.
you're going to go to Japan for the Olympics, man. Are you looking forward to it?
I am, yes.
You are?
Well, I have to.
There you go. Break time.